You walk into the room. You don't say much. But suddenly, everything changes. Voices get tighter. Laughter fades a little too quickly. Someone adjusts their posture, another checks their phone. No one says anything directly, but you can feel it. The air reacts to you. It's not because you're rude, not because you're trying to dominate. It's because your presence unsettles something in them, something they don't even have words for. You haven't done anything, and yet something about you threatens the illusion they're trying to protect. It is not necessary to be loved. It is more useful to be feared, or at least respected. This video isn't about the power you show. It's about the power you don't realize you carry. The kind that lives in your eyes, in your silence, in your refusal to play dumb to make others comfortable. And because of that, people fear you more than you know. Not everyone, of course, but those who live by masks, those who fear depth, those who manipulate, project, and play status games. To them, you are danger incarnate. You are a mirror, a spotlight, a quiet rebellion. And today, we're going to reveal the 13 subtle signs that your very presence carries a kind of Machiavellian power, one that unsettles, disarms, and scares people, without you ever having to raise your voice. The Machiavellian power no one talks about. Machiavelli is often misunderstood. People think of manipulation, cruelty, or deceit. But The Prince wasn't a book about evil. It was a book about how power actually works in a world of appearances, egos, alliances, and fear. And one of its most unsettling truths? Power is not always loud. It's felt. It's sensed. And it often goes unspoken. In fact, true power often scares people, not because of what it does, but because of what it implies. You don't need to announce it. They feel it in how you observe, in how you don't over-explain, in how you're willing to walk away from what others desperately chase. That is what this video is about. If you've ever felt the discomfort of being too much for people, if others misinterpret your stillness, your confidence, your silence, if you've seen faces change when you enter a room, this may be why. Let's break it down. Sign 1. People smile, but avoid eye contact. They're polite. They laugh at your jokes, but their eyes rarely meet yours, and when they do, they flick away too fast. This isn't shyness. It's a micro-reaction to psychological exposure. Eye contact with someone powerful is like standing in front of a mirror that reflects more than just your face. It reflects your intent, your insecurity, your game. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. People sense when they're being truly seen, and it unsettles them. They may smile, but they'll rarely hold your gaze, because somewhere deep down, they fear what you're seeing. Sign 2. You're excluded from circles that secretly admire you. You notice you're not invited, not included in certain conversations, not tagged, mentioned, or acknowledged, even though you've clearly contributed or belong. But behind closed doors, those same people reference your words, borrow your ideas, and watch your moves. This is selective exclusion, not because you're weak, but because your presence unlevels their hierarchy. You're not easily flattered. You don't need permission to think deeply. You radiate something they haven't mastered, self-trust. And in a group built on subtle status games, self-trust is dangerous. So they keep you close enough to study, but far enough to never confront their own inadequacy. Sign 3. You intimidate without trying. You've probably heard it before. You're intense. You're intimidating. You just have this energy. And you think, me? I'm just existing. But that's exactly why. You're not performing. You're not begging for validation. You're not shrinking to fit anyone's comfort zone. And in a world where many people are constantly managing their image, someone who walks in unapologetically whole is unsettling. Because if you're not afraid of being seen, what else aren't you afraid of? Sign 4. Your presence shifts the room's energy. You enter, and something changes. Not loudly, not dramatically, but you feel it. People go quiet. Conversations redirect. Body language stiffens or becomes overly performative. It's like your presence triggers a silent alarm in the nervous systems of others. Why? Because some part of them recognizes there's someone here who sees through illusions. Machiavelli wrote that appearances are essential to leadership, but he also understood that the perception of perception is power in itself. When you walk in, people subconsciously calculate how honest they can be, how much of their persona will hold, and how much they'll be forced to adjust. It's not fear of harm, it's fear of being revealed. Sign 5. People copy you, then distance themselves. You start saying something new. Suddenly they're saying it. You shift how you dress, think, speak. A week later, they're mirroring the exact style. But just as quickly, they pull away. Why? Because they admire you, but don't know how to coexist with what they haven't yet embodied themselves. They take your presence as a silent challenge to their ego, and once they've copied enough to feel safe, they reject the source, because staying near you means confronting what they still lack. This is classic Machiavellian tension. People use what they fear to gain advantage, but only from a safe distance. Sign 6. You're always too much or not enough. You're told you're too quiet, then too intense, too confident or too cold, too focused, too detached, too in your head. These contradictions aren't feedback, they're projections, responses to something in you that refuses to bend. Your power is not reactive. It doesn't beg to be liked, it doesn't self-correct just to fit in. That unsettles people who rely on control through subtle social pressure. To them, your neutrality is not neutrality, it's non-compliance. They want you to pick a side, dilute yourself, explain yourself, and when you don't, they call you too much or not enough, because they don't know how to define someone who exists outside their emotional script. Sign 7. You see through masks, and they know it. People sense it even if they don't admit it. You see through facades. You notice contradictions. You catch tone shifts. You pick up on what wasn't said, and that alone makes people uneasy. In The Prince, Machiavelli famously said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." But when you see the reality behind appearances, it flips the power dynamic. You become the observer, the revealer, the mirror. And people wearing masks don't like mirrors. They may accuse you of being cold, distant, or suspicious, not because you are, but because your clarity threatens their illusion. Sign 8. Others try to dismiss you, first and fast. You offer an idea. You raise a valid question. You bring calm, reason, or depth into the room. And someone immediately talks over you, laughs, changes the subject, or worse, gives you that subtle nod that says, "Cute, but no." This isn't coincidence, it's preemptive dismissal, a psychological tactic to neutralize perceived threat. They know your presence demands attention, so they try to control the narrative before it forms. Machiavelli warned of this tactic. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few understand what you really are. They see what you are, potentially more competent, more honest, more stable, and they fear what happens if others start seeing it too. So they strike early, they mock subtly. They try to get others to look away from you, because they know the longer you speak, the more power you reveal. Sign 9. You attract jealousy from quiet corners. You think you're being humble. You don't brag. You're just focused. And yet, there's tension. People you've supported seem suddenly cold. Friends who used to cheer for you start acting withdrawn. Colleagues begin treating you like a rival, but never admit it. You've stepped into what Machiavelli called the envy of those below. It's a subtle form of hostility from people who can't do what you do, and can't admit they want to. You didn't steal anything. You didn't cheat. But you represent what they fear they'll never become. And so, instead of rising with you, they shrink from you. Or worse, they begin quietly trying to undermine you. Sign 10. People seek your approval, then resent you for it. They come to you for advice. They quote you, compliment you. They orbit your world, drawing from your energy, your insight, your peace. But after a while, the dynamic turns. They begin challenging you more, minimizing what you say. They say things like, "You think you know everything, even if you've said nothing at all." Why? Because your approval became a mirror for their insecurity. They depended on your presence to feel grounded, and once that became obvious, they resented their own dependence. So rather than thank you, they tried to dethrone you. This is one of the darker aspects of power Machiavelli warned about. Hatred is gained as much by good works as by evil. It's not fair, but it's real. People often love the version of you they can benefit from, and fear the version that doesn't need them back. Sign 11. You're the first blamed, last apologized to. Something goes wrong, and all eyes drift toward you. Tension rises, and someone says it's your vibe. Even when you've done nothing wrong, you find yourself subtly or overtly assigned responsibility. And yet, when the truth surfaces, when you're proven right, when the moment passes, the apology never comes. This isn't a mistake. It's a defense mechanism. When someone radiates composure, awareness, or strength, they become the perfect emotional scapegoat for fragile egos. Machiavelli noted that leaders, especially calm and competent ones, are often held to double standards. He who causes another to become powerful ruins himself. In many cases, people blame you first because your power makes them feel powerless, and if they admitted their projection, they'd also have to admit your strength. So instead, they rewrite the narrative to protect their pride, even if it means rewriting reality. Sign 12. You're feared more in absence than presence. You leave a room, and the energy doesn't relax, it sharpens. People talk more about you when you're not there than when you are. They analyze, speculate, even criticize, often with a nervous edge. Not because you hurt them, but because you're not around to soften the weight of your presence. This is a phenomenon Machiavelli understood deeply. True power doesn't need surveillance. It leaves an imprint. Your presence may have disrupted unconscious games, exposed subtle lies, or simply reminded people of truths they'd rather avoid. When you're gone, those impressions don't leave with you. They linger, and people either evolve or grow resentful. Sign 13. Your silence says more than their words. You don't argue every point. You don't rush to correct misconceptions. You let others speak, even when you know the truth behind their words. And that silence, it unsettles people more than confrontation ever could, because silence is ambiguous, and ambiguity in a powerful person is intimidating. They don't know what you're thinking, what you'll do next, or how much you've already seen. Machiavelli wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." You don't speak to be heard. You speak to move. And when you don't speak, people start to fear what's coming. Your silence becomes a statement, "I don't need to prove anything." And that, more than anything, terrifies those who define themselves by noise. You are the signal. They can't explain. If these signs resonate, it doesn't mean you're arrogant or aggressive or manipulative. It means you carry something that doesn't need approval. And in a world addicted to validation and performance, that's rare. You are not the loudest voice in the room. You are the one people measure themselves against, without realizing it. And yes, that kind of power scares people. But here's the truth. It's not your job to shrink for their comfort, or to explain your stillness, or to justify your gravity. As Machiavelli understood, power is not about being feared through force. It's about being respected through presence, and your presence, whether you realize it or not, is reshaping the room before you even say a word.